Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden with your top stories. Global stocks slide from record highs as two portions of US chip earnings fail to satisfy investors' hunger. Iran says it's reached an agreement with Oman on a proposed route through the Strait of Hormuz, raising the prospect of energy flows resuming. And another busy day for European earnings with results from Siemens and Commerzbank. We'll be speaking to the CEOs of both companies. Well, a very good morning. Here is the picture in markets. Korea setting the tone once again. The Kospi is down 4.2%. We've seen losses of around 4%, more than for Samsung and SK Hynix. And they have been knocked by the disappointment on guidance from Sandisk and Western Digital in the US, both down in post-market trading. And now Nasdaq futures are down 0.2% as well. In the middle there, you've got Brent at $79 a barrel, holding below that 80 level after Iran said that it had reached an agreement with Oman on a proposed shipping route through the Strait of Hormuz. And given that allays some inflation concerns, reducing the chance of rate hikes, gold, which of course lacks a yield, did have a chance to break out above $4,300 an ounce. It's back just below that level now after its biggest gain in 3 months. So 4,262 is where we trade on the yellow metal. Plenty to bring you this morning, plenty of earnings. Let's get started. We begin with breaking earnings out of Germany, kicking off with Siemens, with Commerzbank's second quarter numbers. What you're seeing is second quarter net interest income just shy of estimates, 2.06 billion euros, and planning a buyback of up to 1.2 billion euros. So those are the key figures so far. They have released also second quarter operating profit of 1.37 billion euros, which is a beat on the estimate of 1.32 billion euros. So these numbers, of course, coming before further talks over a potential takeover by UniCredit. Traders bracing for an outsized swing in the shares off the back of these numbers. And I'm going to be speaking to the CEO, Bettina Orlopp, later on this hour at 6:45 a.m. London time. The expectation being that she'll be on the phone to UniCredit's Andrea Orcel today to determine how to move forward there. Now, let us actually turn to Siemens now. The red head crossing the terminal is that they have raised their outlook. They see full-year EPS at 11.20 euros. That's shy to 11.20 to 11.50, so in a range there, pre-PPA. So raising the outlook on their software and data gains, and this is raising the expectations for a second time this year. So they now are seeing the earnings per share before purchase price allocation accounting, as I say, of as much as 11.50 euros from as much as 11.10 previously. And they've reported revenue growth in all divisions in the fiscal third quarter. Group free cash flow, can't get my words out this morning, jumping 42%. So those are the numbers from Siemens, and we're going to be speaking to the CEO, Roland Busch, later on in the programme as well, 6:45 a.m. London time too. Now, let's turn to the broader markets because we have stocks in Asia falling as that disappointing guidance from US memory makers weighs on sentiment. We can go to Winnie Xu for an update from Hong Kong. Winnie, what are you focused on this morning?
Yeah, good morning, Lizzie. Well, just as you mentioned, we are seeing quite some pressure for Asian stocks today, following those disappointment from the likes of Sandisk and Western Digital when it comes to their earnings. Now, expectation has been sky high, and that is why at this point, investors still want to be looking out for the stronger outlook, stronger guidance, and also stronger pricing power. And that is why we are seeing memory stocks leading declines today, especially in South Korea. Now, when it comes to Japanese yen, still holding steady right below that 158 level against the dollar following that historic joint intervention between the U.S. and Japan, while bonds here also holding on to their gains after we saw some firmer demand from that 30-year bond auction of the JGB, showing that investors are still showing quite some relief when it comes to markets. Now, flip where we take a look at commodity space, because gold here, as you mentioned, extending those gains amid that optimism for the Strait of Hormuz to reopen, and investors right now trimming those bets on the Federal Reserve to hike rates further. And we're seeing gold-related names as well as mining sector both gaining in Asia. Now, flip the board, we also take another close look at something very interesting going on when it comes to the U.S.-China trade tensions, because we are seeing solar stocks here in China falling after we've learned that the U.S. is planning to impose further tariffs and minimum prices on polysilicon, while as part of that retaliation towards some of the U.S. curbs on tech that we are seeing recently, Beijing also released these new series of measures, including tighter export controls on drones and also a security review on some of these office equipment being imported into China. So we're seeing the drone-related names, the printers in China rising on that front. Back to you, Lizzie.
Winnie, thank you very much. That's Bloomberg's Winnie Su. Well, as we look ahead, Nasdaq futures pointing lower after those disappointing earnings from the memory makers Sandisk and Western Digital. Both stocks, as I say, falling in extended trading after their guidance disappointed. Let's go to Sam Unstead now. He's unusually in Hong Kong for us today. Morning, Sam. Nice to see you bright and early. So actually, these earnings were pretty solid, beats and raises, but it's the guidance that traders seem to be focused on. Why isn't it enough?
Yeah, so the guidance is definitely the part they're focusing on, but also, these are two companies bumping up against extremely high expectations. So, I mean, even with a sell-off over the course of July, Sandisk shares still up by nearly 500% this year. Western Digital have tripled. So these are very, very high expectations to coming into any numbers with. So on the face of it, as you mentioned, Lizzie, the results are pretty reasonable. But it's the bar now, especially for these very, very high-flying AI stocks, and these memory names in particular have done very well, is very, very high and very difficult to get over. And so you need, blowout earnings on top of blowout earnings in order to go further, and they weren't quite able to deliver that.
And just staying with the tech theme, there's a big change of leadership at the top of Google. What's the strategy there? Who's moving?
Yeah, so it's a big change in sort of the very broadly across their AI strategy. And we've had, quite an interesting flow of news over the course of this week. We had this story about Microsoft and how much of their revenue is coming from OpenAI. Also today, DeepSeek, looking to raise prices quite significantly across AI. I think what you're seeing almost everywhere is this increased competition. It's higher and higher intensity as we get further and further into the AI story. And, as we see results coming out, we're now quite deep into earnings season. I think what you're seeing is these reactions once results are out of this is how we're setting up for the next set, and this is our kind of AI story. And for Google, as you mentioned, it's a whole selection of very prominent changes to position themselves more strongly.
OK, and you can see some of those names on the screen as we speak. Sam, thank you very much. That's Bloomberg's Sam Unstead. Now, turning to the geopolitics, because we've had Iran saying that it has reached an agreement with Oman to come up with a proposed shipping route through the Strait of Hormuz. An Iranian foreign ministry spokesman said that a joint statement from Tehran and Muscat is under review. It's in the final drafting stage now. President Trump has also suggested that an agreement is possible.
I'd rather make a deal because I don't want to kill people. I do not want to kill people. But at some point we're going to we were set for the biggest attack of any attack, and we've hit them very hard for the last few months. But we were all set for the biggest attack since World War II, and they called me and they said, "Please don't do it. Let's talk." And then they said, "We never said that." You know what? The fake news knows they did say that, but we are talking. Let's see what happens.
For more, let's bring in Bloomberg Horizons Middle East and Africa anchor Abir Abu Omar. Abir, good to see you. So we talked yesterday about this deal that potentially Iran and Oman are doing. How close are they to it? And really, what's Washington's role in all of this?
Two very good questions, Lizzie. Good morning. So what we know is that you're right, Oman and Iran are or have finalized the deal. They're just now in a stage of drafting those lines in the deal. And once those are public, we'll, of course, update with that. According to Iran, however, Washington was not involved in any of this, despite the sound that you just heard from President Trump saying that the Iranians did reach out. But Lizzie, just to be sure, this deal between Iran and Oman is primarily, if not only, about the Strait of Hormuz, a mechanism if you were to open up the waterway to ships. So what we understand is that there is a mechanism for inbound and outbound ships to take specific routes with the help of Iran and Oman. We understand that, again, it is in final drafting stage. Baqai, that is the spokesperson you were referring to from the Foreign Ministry, said that the negotiations are forward moving. He also said that the deal will be struck if certain third parties do not obstruct the process, obviously referring to the United States, possibly Israel there as well. He also did not mention any role to Washington in all of this. Now, Lizzie, we have been reporting, of course, that Iran and Oman have been in discussions over the past 10 days or so to come up with this mechanism. But again, from the Iranian side, they maintain that this could be temporary. Yesterday, we also reported, citing Iranian state TV, that this is a temporary opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and it may not even be immediate. So they've downplayed even the discussions that are taking place with Oman. But you can tell that markets are reacting positively to this news. You're seeing Brent crude prices trading below $80 on the barrel. So markets are reacting like this is a positive or a breakthrough sign in all of this. But those negotiations, again, I have to emphasize here that they are not formal discussions between Washington and Iran. They are not targeting the 14 concessions that were reached in Switzerland back in June. They are primarily about opening up the Strait of Hormuz and trying to get a trickle through the waterway that has either been paralyzed or has seen hardly any ships move through it over the past 3 weeks or so.
OK, and yet oil still below $80 a barrel on these hopes of progress. Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar, thank you very much for that update. Now let's take a look at the risk events on the docket for today. At 7 a.m. London time, we'll get German factory orders. We'll also at 10 a.m. get euro area retail sales numbers. And then at 1:30 p.m. London time, continuing that drumbeat up to the payrolls figure, we'll have US initial jobless claims. So that is what's on the agenda for today. Still ahead on Daybreak Europe, we'll bring you conversations with the CEOs of Commerzbank and Siemens, those from 6:45 a.m. London time. But first, more earnings, this time from SoftBank, and that report set to test the strength of investors' AI optimism. We'll have you a preview of those numbers that drop at 7:30 a.m. London time. So don't go anywhere. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, 6:15 a.m. here in London. Well, we're set to get first quarter earnings from SoftBank later this morning, and investors are going to be looking for signs that its bet on AI really is paying off. Bloomberg's Japan tech reporter Min Jong Lee joins me now with more from Tokyo. Really good to have you on the show. Let's just talk through what the focus is then for investors in these numbers, because of course a big focus surely is going to be how SoftBank manages its finances if OpenAI delays its IPO. Good morning.
Morning. Of course, we're in a place actually where things could very easily swing either way. This is because SoftBank is exposed to a lot of AI and other technology assets, including OpenAI, as you just mentioned. But the markets have been very volatile, with stock prices moving 5%, 10% up and down daily. And these moves have a direct impact on SoftBank's P&L. And for the June quarter so far, it looks like it could could have been a mixed bag. You have chip stocks, which performed very well, especially Intel, whose shares surged 200%, more than 200% during the June quarter, likely having a positive impact. On the other hand, you have the Vision Fund unit, which is still likely to have posted losses because of poor performance for some of its assets, such as PayPay. PayPay is a payment startup that debuted in March, and their share price is likely to have has fallen significantly during the same period, likely having a negative impact. As for OpenAI, where SoftBank holds more than 10% stake, OpenAI's valuation is likely to have stayed unchanged for the quarter, potentially having a neutral impact. So we have a few mixed signals, and we'll have to see what the actual numbers look like when they're disclosed shortly this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, how much are these numbers going to test the Asia tech rally more broadly?
It depends on what we see of SoftBank figures later today and how the share prices have impacted SoftBank's P&L. But the key thing to remember is that SoftBank is increasingly exposed to these AI technology assets. And with a growing volatility and uncertainty surrounding AI compute, it's actually become very difficult to anticipate what's next and what's to come. And of course, Masayoshi Son is engaged in a number of multi-billion AI projects with key focuses on robotics and also data centers. SoftBank now has big data center projects in the US and also in France. And there's a huge amount of interest surrounding how SoftBank plans to finance and, of course, develop this 10 gigawatt data center project in Ohio, which will possibly have big off-takers, including OpenAI and others. So there's a lot of interest in what Son has to say about these projects going forward. And of course, for today, the focus will be on CFO Goto's remarks in Tokyo.
OK, well, we look forward to your coverage of all of that. Bloomberg's Min-Jong Lee, thank you very much. And staying with the tech theme, coming up on the programme, some of Wall Street's biggest hedge funds have been hit by a wave of phishing attacks. We're going to bring you our scoop next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. To a Bloomberg scoop now. Bloomberg has learned that hackers launched a wave of sophisticated attacks on Wall Street firms targeting information systems at major money managers. Point72 Asset Management told investors that it had been attacked, but there were no initial signs of stolen client data. Let's get more now with Bloomberg's Jill Desis. Jill, just talk to us about how this attack was carried out and really who else was targeted.
Hey, Lizzie. So, look, the way that this attack was really carried out was a really sophisticated form of cyber attacking called voice phishing or vishing. So this is something that we've seen pick up recently. It's where via a phone call or a message, what the cyber attacker does is they imitate the voice of someone in an attempt to trick these employees into giving away information, sensitive information. So that's essentially the tactic that you're looking at is being in use here. Obviously, we just talked about Point72 being a target. What people familiar with this matter have also told us is that this is something that was also targeted for Two Sigma, Millennium, Citadel. So you've got multiple major hedge funds that were the target of this type of attack, as well as some other firms too. Most of those firms have declined to comment. Two Sigma said that its systems weren't compromised as a result of this, that the attackers didn't get anything. But it does kind of show you here that a lot of these attacks are becoming more sophisticated and really more bold in terms of how they're targeting and who they're ultimately targeting here.
Yeah, bolder and trillions of dollars at stake. Why are cyber attacks surging across Wall Street?
Well, this may not really come as much of a surprise, but a lot of this has to do with the further sophistication advancement of a lot of artificial intelligence systems. So we spoke to an analyst who mentioned that, a cyber attack of, this kind of scope maybe a while ago would have taken, 50 targets, or the cyber attackers would have been able to target, 50 targets at a time. Now that could potentially be, as many as 1,000. So you're looking at, as this type of AI models, this technology becomes more and more sophisticated, it's also these cyber attackers that are able to sort of use that to their advantage as well.
Okay, Jill, thank you very much for some of those details in that story. It's a great read, and I encourage everybody to read it. Bloomberg's Jill Desis there. Now, I'm going to be speaking to the CEO of Commerzbank later on in the programme. That's Bettina Orlopp. She'll be joining me at 6:45 a.m. London time. And I just want to bring you another line that has broken in the past minute from Commerzbank, which is that its joint approach with UniCredit could create value. This is according to the bank. Of course, it reported earnings earlier on in the morning, only about 25 minutes ago. And Commerzbank, in those numbers, revealing its $1.2 billion euro buyback. Of course, Orlopp trying to show that her strategy works. Of course, she's under pressure from this targeting from UniCredit, which is set to expand its stake in Commerzbank to nearly 50%. She's pledged to really implement these deep changes once he obtains control of the company. He has, and she is deeply opposed to some of his proposals. So this joint approach with UniCredit could create value, according to the German bank. Now, let's turn to some other top stories that we're following for you this morning. Bloomberg has learned that Situational Awareness has made a $400 million investment in a private company. The moves come after the hedge fund nearly collapsed under a barrage of margin calls from lenders last week. The fund was hit hard after a slew of its public tech investments fell sharply before it reached a deal with Citadel to offload the bulk of its portfolio. Staying with tech, a Meta AI model reportedly accessed the internet during cybersecurity testing and breached another company's systems. The information says it happened because of an error in the sandbox testing environment, and it comes after OpenAI and Anthropic disclosed similar incidents of their AI models taking unsanctioned actions during safety tests. OpenAI, meanwhile, says that the artificial intelligence models behind an attack on Hugging Face began communicating through undetected message boards, working together to break out of their testing environment as early as May. The company says multiple internal AI agents spent months leaving notes for each other, coalescing around the goal of accessing the internet to complete tasks that were impossible without online access. And two Fed officials have suggested that rate increases could be needed as the central bank looks to tackle inflation. Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari told CNBC that now is the time to start moving rates higher, and said 3 hikes before the end of this year wouldn't be impossible. Meanwhile, Fed Governor Lisa Cook says that she's prepared to move on rates if she doesn't see signs of continued disinflation soon.
As I have described, inflation is too high. And I consider the risks to the inflation side of the dual mandate higher than the risks to the employment side at this point. As such, I am prepared to act by raising rates if necessary.
Lisa Cook there. So they are prepared to raise rates if necessary. Well, we have an update in geopolitics. Brent is weaker. It's below $80 a barrel today. 79 is where we trade right now on Brent, 79.08, as you can see in the middle there. But given that we have this proposed reached agreement between Iran and Oman reportedly on a shipping route through the Strait of Hormuz, inflation concerns somewhat allayed. That reduces the chance of rate hikes, and therefore you've got gold here at $4,255 a troy ounce. Of course, gold lacks a yield. It had the chance to break out above $4,300, and it's just below that level as things stand. Well, coming up, SpaceX's first major stock unlock hits today in the next test for shares that are already below their IPO price. More on that next. This is Bloomberg. Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden with your top stories. Global stocks slide from record highs as two portions of US chip earnings fail to satisfy investors' hunger. Meanwhile, Iran says that it's reached an agreement with Oman on a proposed route through the Strait of Hormuz, raising the prospect of energy flows resuming. Plus, Commerzbank says teaming up with UniCredit could create value for shareholders, while German industrial giant Siemens raises its earnings outlook. We'll be speaking to the CEOs of both companies later on this hour. A very good morning if you are just joining us, 6:30 a.m. here in London. This is the picture in markets. And once again, we've got to start with the Kospi because we've seen outsized moves for some of the chip makers. Samsung down 4.5%, SK Hynix down 6%. So the Kospi down more than 4%, and that dragging down the broader MSCI Pacific Index 1.1%. What was the story behind SK Hynix and Samsung? Well, they've been knocked by the disappointment on guidance that we've seen from the US. Sandisk and Western Digital both down in post-market trading. So as I look at NASDAQ futures, they are now down 0.1%. But we also have to factor in the geopolitics here. As I say, Iran says it's reached an agreement with Oman on a proposed shipping route through the Strait of Hormuz. So you've got Brent there holding below $80 a barrel. And gold had been above $4,300 a troy ounce. It's below that level now, but the boost to gold really because some of these inflation concerns have been allayed by the latest in the Middle East. Now, let's go back to Germany for yet more earnings this morning. These now from Rheinmetall. Of course, the defence giant, second quarter results here set to benefit from German government contracts. What they are saying is that they still see full-year operating margin of about 19%. The estimate was for 19.1%, so pretty much in line. And they see full-year sales of a range of 13.7 billion euros to 14.2 billion euros. The estimate was for 14.08 billion euros, so a range that encompasses the nearly gets up to the estimate. First half sales of 5.23 billion euros. The estimate was for 5.1 billion euros, so an ever so slight beat there. And first half operating margin 786 million euros, so beating the estimate of 697.2 million euros. We'll be speaking to the CEO of Rheinmetall later on this morning. That conversation with Francine Lacroix, and we'll bring it to you on tomorrow's edition of Daybreak Europe. Now, let us turn back to SpaceX because investors are hanging on to SpaceX shares after a plunge below their IPO price, are bracing for the next potential hit. $101 billion worth of stock becomes available for trading today as a lockup restricting insider share sales ends. And we can get more now with Charles Capel, Bloomberg's equity capital markets editor here in Europe. Charles, lockups aren't new, but they're not unique, and they're not unique to SpaceX, but we've never seen anything on this scale. So given the roller coaster ride that it has been for SpaceX so far since the IPO, how big of a market reaction should we be braced for?
Honestly, it's anybody's guess. And that's the thing with SpaceX's IPO, is that we are in uncharted territory for everything. We have never seen an increase of equity in a single company quite like this one. It is an extraordinary increase in the share, in the number of shares that are being traded. SpaceX's IPO obviously hit its own records. Now, what we do know is that there's going to be a massive increase in supply of shares as some of those shareholders who are employees or insiders who had shares before the IPO start to get the ability to sell their shares. That's 911 million more shares joining the market, so more than double than were offered in the IPO. And as you have that massive increase in supply and you assume that there's the same amount of demand, you would guess that the stock would go down. But as Matt Levine wrote about really well yesterday, you know, people know this is going to happen. This has always been scheduled. So people will have been anticipating that at some point in the future there's going to be a big increase of supply. And so that would have put downwards pressure on the shares already. So we don't know how much of this lockup has actually been baked into the share price already. And we also don't know how many shares are actually going to be sold, because of course SpaceX is trading below its IPO price, and people may not want to sell before that. But importantly, these shareholders who are now able to sell their shares, they wouldn't have got their shares at the IPO price. They would have got their shares at a much lower price whenever they got it through either joining it through the Twitter X acquisition, the XAI merger, all of the different ways that they may have got shares throughout SpaceX's lifetime.
Okay, and of course the point of having a 9-stage structure is to avoid a free-for-all sell-off, so they'll be hoping that that's not what happens today. We also have this really interesting chart showing that it's not only that SpaceX and Tesla shares have sold off sharply over the past month. Take a look at this. You've also got the market pricing in higher credit risk. It's never paid yet, has it, to bet against Elon Musk? So could that combination that you're seeing on the screen right there suggest that this is a canary in the coal mine?
Look, as you said, it's never a good idea to bet against Elon Musk. I mean, there's definitely some serious questions about the businesses. There are big questions within the market about the AI trade. The results yesterday showed an enormous amount of spending, higher than people expected, particularly on the AI side of things. So people are a little bit concerned about that. It travels through to Tesla as well, and worrying about whether the two businesses can operate symbiotically. But look, SpaceX's shares are taking a bit of a dip recently because they're finding their valuation. We had this fixed price in the IPO, and it's going to take a moment for the market to work out, right, how do we value this company?
A lot of analysts telling us that they're having an identity problem at the moment. Charles, thank you very much. That's Bloomberg's Charles Capel. Well, coming up, we'll discuss the impact of this summer's extreme weather on the insurance industry as Zurich and Swiss Re report today. Details next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Just coming up to 6:40 a.m. here in London. Well, with results from two major insurance players out today, we're getting a better picture of how extreme weather has affected the industry. Zurich Insurance Group has reported a 13% gain in profit for the first half of 2026, just ahead of estimates. Meanwhile, Swiss Re's return on equity for the first half has missed average estimates. So those numbers in, Bloomberg Swiss finance reporter Noel Ilian has been looking through them for us. So Noel, just tell us how these results, if they have given us more clarity perhaps on the damages from the wildfires. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning from Zurich. So both actually Swiss Re and Zurich mentioned they had lower catastrophe losses in the first half of this year compared to last year when there were the California wildfires in January. So the current wildfires taking place in Europe don't appear to have fed through into these earning results, and that is largely also due to the fact that they took place more in July, which is out of the first half of the year, so to speak. So we should see an impact of those, or see if they do end up impacting the insurers, we should see those feed through in the next earnings cycle. But I'm sure both CEOs will be asked about this a lot today, so hopefully we'll get some guidance on what we can expect and what the impact has been of the wildfires on both later today.
Yeah, a huge question really is whether Europe's going to become uninsurable in vast swathes. Noel, though, thank you for your analysis. That's Bloomberg's Noel Ilian. And we'll be speaking to the CFO of Swiss Re on the opening trade at 8:45 a.m. London time, as well as the CEO of Zurich Insurance on the Pulse at 9:15. So don't miss those two interviews. But coming up, more CEO interviews for you. We're going to be talking to the CEO of Commerzbank off the back of their earnings, Bettina Orlopp, coming up next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Now, Commerzbank has said that a joint strategy with UniCredit could create value for investors in the strongest signal yet that it's seeking to avoid a confrontation. The bank has announced a buyback of up to €1.2 billion as second quarter net interest income beat. We can now speak to the CEO of Commerzbank, Bettina Orlopp. Bettina, really appreciate you making time for Bloomberg this morning. Thank you, and it's nice to see you. Just tell us your message to shareholders this quarter.
Well, it's pretty clear. I mean, we deliver. We have seen now a record net income for the first half of the year with €1.8 billion. And that is driven by very strong revenues. They are up 7%, specifically impacted by 8% net commission income growth. And it's coupled with a very good cost discipline, meaning that operating result went even up 14%. And we now have a competitive cost-income ratio of 53% if you include compulsory contributions. Without, it's 50%. So all in all, very, very helpful data. It shows that we deliver despite all turbulences there might be out there.
And what's been the impact of the war in Iran and the German spending package on your business?
Well, overall, I mean, the war on Iran has shown little impact. I mean, we increased our guidance for the full year in May, and that has not changed. So we stick to our 3.4 billion net income, and which also means a very decent capital return for this year. I mean, what we see in Germany in the moment is recovery of some data. We have increased our GDP growth forecast to 1%, which was 0.6% beforehand. And we see IFO data, the IFO index improving. We see order data improving, and we see further reform packages launched by the German government when it comes to the pension reform, but also the labor market. So all in all, this might create some tailwind. We, however, also see that Mittelstand clients are still rather cautious.
OK. We also have to talk about UniCredit. You've said in a statement in the earnings presentation alongside these numbers that teaming up with UniCredit could be positive. Are you still going to be speaking directly to the CEO, Andrea Orcel, after the earnings presentation?
Well, you know, I mean, yeah, we talk and we have talked after every quarter, UniCredit and Commerzbank, because there are a very large investor since a couple of quarters. So it's very normal that we have interactions with a very significant shareholder, and and these meetings will continue for sure.
Yeah, I just wondered what your relationship's been like with Andrea Orcel, Bettina, because we know that he wants to speak with the German government and the Workers' Council, and made no mention of Commerzbank management when in the recent comments.
Well, first of all, I think we are both. We're both committed to increase and maximize the value for our stakeholders. And I think that is a good basis for meetings, also meetings between the two of us.
Well, what will your main other asks be then in the takeover talks? I'm thinking about keeping the international network, the headquarters, keeping the public listing. Maybe you want some job guarantees.
I understand the interest in that, but you will understand that I think things like that should be discussed first between Commerzbank and UniCredit, and then we will definitely come out to the public to share more details on it. For the time being, I think it's important, A, that we deliver and that we continue to deliver against our targets, and B, that we are in constructive dialogue with UniCredit to figure out also some technical details, but also then how we organize the phase ahead of us, but also how potential target pictures could look like. And the best thing to do that, and the most value accretive thing to do it, is to do it jointly, and that's the basis.
OK, then. Well, talk to us about any strategic tweaks that you've got planned, because I'm sure lots of investors will be wondering really whether they would make much of a difference at this point.
Well, you know, I mean, for us in the moment, we are a publicly listed bank. So for us, the most important thing in the moment is to deliver what we have promised to the market, because that is also what the expectation is. And we have some aspirational targets out there, not only for this year, but also when it comes to 2028 and 2030. Think about the 17% ROTE for 2028 and the 21% for 2030. We can't stop now or do anything, but we really need to invest. We need to further develop our value proposition. We need to implement our initiatives, and we need to be out there with our clients. And in parallel, it is our job jointly together with UniCredit to figure out how we can create value in a joint approach.
And perhaps you don't want to talk about the details of the takeover talks, understand that, but have any investors apart from UniCredit asked you, Bettina, to step aside as CEO to make way for somebody else to strike a deal with Andrea Rochelle?
No, rather the contrary. I think it's, and I see it as my mandate to protect the institution and to maximize the value for the institution. I have a contract until 2029, and as long as the supervisory board is not asking me differently, I will be there for the company, for its stakeholders, and when you look back and if you just take the last 22 months, we already acted in the interest of all stakeholders, and that includes UniCredit, because we have improved significantly our profitability. Our share price has tripled. So all in all, I think everybody can be very, very happy with the development of the bank also in the last 22, 24 months.
Yeah, and on that note, you've unveiled this €1.2 billion buyback. I wonder, are you considering altering your distribution policy anymore, given that dividends and buybacks mainly benefit UniCredit?
Well, we do what is best for our shareholders when it comes to capital return, and that clearly includes also UniCredit. We will not discriminate any of our shareholders, and we promised to the market, to the investors, that we would return 100% of our net income. You just need to consider the 81, as long as we have not reached our target CET1 ratio of 13.5%. We are currently at 14.4%, and that has already considered that we will return 100% of our net income this year. So therefore, we are committed to our capital return policy, which is part of our equity story. And it's beneficial for all shareholders, and clearly it's also beneficial for UniCredit.
Bettina, it's obviously a sensitive time. I really appreciate you talking through all of those developments and your earnings for us on Bloomberg. Commerzbank CEO Bettina Orlopp there. Great to see you. Thank you very much. Well, let's turn to some other earnings in Germany. Siemens raising its earnings expectations for a second time this year. The manufacturer says that that's due to a surge in data centre spending and higher returns from selling software to industry. And the CEO, Roland Busch, told Anna Edwards that the company was seeing strength throughout its digital work.
These are two pieces. One is our automation business and our software business, and both are really firing. So our automation business had an order intake increase of 11%, grew by 7%. So we see a good momentum there that comes with a good conversion. And our software business is very strong. It grew by 11%. If you take our total Siemens digital business, software and services, it grew by 15%. So we have a growth momentum, which obviously translates also into good profitability.
And what about the competitive landscape? I'm thinking in particular about factory automation. There are Chinese competitors who are in that space, and I wonder how competitive the landscape is right now. So we are very competitive also in China. You know, we developed and launched new Chinese products. The first 16 landed in the market, another batch of 26 we launched early this year. They grow in the mid-20s percentage points. So we are winning customers, we're winning new customers, we're winning customers back. So automation business is doing in China very well. But then the rest of the portfolio globally as well, we see a pickup also in the machine business, also in China, which helps us also on the high-end side, where we see our core portfolio of automation landing very well. So therefore, in total, we did our homework in developing really super competitive new products in all markets, by the way, in China, of course, in particular.
Okay, so standing up to the competition in China, then, Roland, let me ask you about the data center build out and the ways that the Siemens product lineup is able to supply that. How sustainable is the demand that you're seeing in connection with the data center rollout?
So let's briefly talk about the impact of data center business. So again, this is a massive investment which goes there. I come to your question in a second. That helped us also growing our smart infrastructure business. For example, electrification business grew by 20%, electrical products by 18%. But we had also a growth from our automation business as well, which was pulled also in this one. So now you understand that we have, of course, the electrification piece, low voltage, medium voltage, where we have a huge demand, which we can serve. But then AI factories, they go more and more into industrial PLCs, where we have a strong offering. We're also adapting our functionality. We can use it. And then after all, if you want to build new data centers, you want to build them fast and super efficient. So we offer a digital twin of a whole AI factory or data center, which you can optimize in the digital world and then build it, which is definitively a benefit for our customers. So it's a very strong offering here. And then it goes into other technologies like 800 volts DC, so direct current. We launched new products, DC products, switching products, which we have in the market. They get a pull. And then when it comes to liquid cooling, the whole situation changes again. And we have an offering there also for things like solid-state transformers. We're working on that. There are new technologies. And we are working with NVIDIA for a blueprint of these new AI factories together, again, using our digital twins. And we are putting products behind that.
That was the Siemens CEO, Roland Busch, and it is a busy day of earnings. We've already had plenty of them, plenty more ahead. Let's also take a look at the other risk events on the docket for today on the macro front. At 7 a.m. London time, in just a couple of minutes, we'll be getting German factory orders. Then at 10 a.m. London time, it's Euro area retail sales. And at 1:30 p.m, US initial jobless claims expected to have ticked up after the World Cup, but staying around a low level ahead of the payrolls numbers tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. It is nearly Friday. That is true. Now, let's take a look at where markets are right now. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index dropping below 1% lower now, and it's dragged down by the losses we've seen in Korea, down 4.5% on the Kospi. Samsung down 4.5%. SK Hynix down 6.8%, dragged down by the guidance from Sandisk and Western Digital overnight. Nasdaq futures, as you can see, pointing lower, but Europe set for a positive session. The opening trade is coming up next. I'll be taking you to the cash open with Anna Edwards. This is Bloomberg.